OBS and
Okay,
wait.
good to go.
Hang on. Button. Yes.
Okay, give quite little bit of pause in here to be able to cut to. Welcome to tonight's spotlight episode of Loss of Lieutenant. I'll be your host tonight, Nick, and I am joined by guest host Kevin.
Good evening.
This weekend is Borderbash, so tonight we're looking at the Borderbash precap. So looking over the missions and how we think we'll approach it, plus some history of Borderbash since that's new, and where it fits in the general tournament season in Australia.
Yeah.
So, I guess start off with Border Bash is new this year. Um, what's the history to get to a new tournament?
Yeah. So Borderbash is this weekend. It's in what, 2 days from time of recording, or 3 days from time of recording. It is its first year as a tournament, and it's been a tournament that I've been wanting personally to run for quite some time. Um, the idea came about a couple of different directions from it, but the seed of an idea first came from listening to Mayacast, when one of their biggest tournaments that they would have over there is Rumble on Route 66, which
Mhm.
was I think it's their biggest one, or maybe it's Arizona Armageddon. I can't remember. But that event was billed from its inception as a traveling event for everyone in the States
Mhm.
because of its location on somewhere on Route 66. Apparently, it is accessible by many
Yeah,
especially on the West Coast, I think.
somewhere central, but not necessarily in any particular one's backyard.
Yeah, I think that was how it started, and I think it's moved to a few different places in the intervening years, mostly because it's either easier to organize or it's gotten bigger and the existing venue was small. And I've always really liked that idea because it means that everyone has like a weekend away. Right? Everyone gets an
Mhm.
opportunity to travel to a different city or town and hang out and sort of, I don't know, not think about the family for a weekend, which
Yeah.
doesn't always happen when you are having an event at a large city where maybe half the player base, it's their home city, which is good for them, but maybe they don't have the same excuse, I guess, to let their hair down, or not everyone has hair, but to cut loose. So I really like that idea, and I've been for a few years been wanting to try to make an event that was similar, the Australian equivalent, I guess.
Mhm.
Australia is very large, and getting to some of the capital cities can be difficult. And also, Australia is unique in that we are very focused around capital cities, and we often forget about that we have regions. We have smaller towns, smaller regional satellite cities where people do play war games. Like, it's not, we're not just
There's something in between Melbourne and Sydney,
right. Exactly.
other
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
Canberra.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we do forget that because the capital cities are so large and so many people live there. It
Mhm.
was another thought to think, well, let's see what players we can get coming out of the smaller towns around in between the major capital cities.
Mhm.
So
Nice.
that was where, yeah, that was kind of what I'd always wanted to do. And then uh what was that? Then the pandemic came and no one could play any
Mhm.
games. And then we had Novacore in 2022, I think it was. That was the last Novacore. I don't know, were you part of the community then, Nick?
No, the last Nova Core happened right before I jumped into N4.
Yeah, right.
I basically started with BCB 22.
Okay, yeah, so you just missed out. And
Mhm.
it turns out that was the final Nova Core. Gav, who had ran the previous two Nova Cores plus previous other events in his local area of Newcastle,
Mhm.
Maitland, he stepped away from the game for personal reasons, and there was no one who had filled that gap of Nova Core.
Mhm.
So, Nova Core 2022 happened. There was nothing in 2023, so I said this is a perfect opportunity to fill that gap in the Queen's or now King's birthday long weekend with this
Yes.
Borderbash or this Rumble on Route 66 style event. And I also felt like it encompassed a lot of the sort of spirit of what Nova Core was. Nova Core at its heyday was like over 100 players, and it was located in a regional town. I guess you could, Newcastle is not Sydney, so
Mhm.
it's a city, but it's not the largest city, and it did feel like a kind of um, traveling event for everyone when we went there. Especially the one in 2019 prior to the pandemic was, sorry, the one in 2022 was in Maitland, which was an hour away, I think, from Newcastle. So even from the new Nova Castorians, is that what we call them? I always get this one wrong because like
Sure.
it doesn't sound right at all. It sounds, you got like Sydney people, Sydney siders,
I guess
Brisbane,
it sounds better than like Newcastleites or something like that.
Newcastleites, yeah, Nova Castorians. It's still like an hour or 45 minutes away from them. So I really, the atmosphere around that whole event was really, really cool. So um it felt like an easy conversion, so to speak. Albeit in a different state, but that was also fine because Victoria at the
Mhm.
time is probably the strongest, not strongest, but the most populous Infinity community we have in Australia. So
Mhm.
um, yeah. So anyway, it
Yeah.
seemed like a really good thing, and I reached out to some local or some local players and some players from interstate to create a sort of committee, um, so that we could decide on where we might want to have it. What format it might want to be, and also to have champions in each state where they could kind of get people together and try and get them to travel to wherever the venue was going to be. Obviously, it ended up being Albury, which is on the
Mhm.
border. It's in New South Wales, actually, so it's actually not in Victoria, but it is on the border of New South Wales and Victoria. Hence the
Was
name
it
Borderbash.
fairly central for Melbourne, Sydney, and Canberra to all drive to, and then those that are further out can fly in, or
Yeah,
fly into Melbourne or Sydney and hitch a ride?
yeah, no, that's very true as well. Like it is like 4 hours
Mhm.
from Melbourne, 4 hours ish from Canberra, and maybe 5 hours from Sydney, which is
Mhm.
all easily doable. And because it's also on a long weekend, the travel there and back doesn't feel as hard on your annual leave balance because you're getting a Monday off anyway.
Yeah, because I like the group carpooling nip with are gonna stay Sunday night and then take a nice leisurely Monday to drive back, as opposed to I remember some CanCons a while back where the last
Yeah.
tournament finished up at 4 in the afternoon and people had work at 8 o'clock the next morning, and it was a 6 hour drive still.
Yeah, it's a tough one, and especially CanCon because you can't always
Mhm.
guarantee that long weekend depending on when Australia Day lands. So you might get the
Yes.
Friday, you might get the Monday, you might not get any day. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, this was. I mean, obviously the King's Birthday long weekend does not apply to every state. I don't think it applies to WA, and it doesn't apply to Queensland either. Um, which hey, if you're not from Australia, we celebrate the monarch's birthday, but not on the same day in every state.
Oh, I had to explain this to my parents the other day about King's birthday long weekend coming up, and having to explain that the last I knew, at least when it was Queen's birthday long weekend, um, only I believe one country in the Commonwealth actually celebrated Queen's birthday on her birthday,
Yeah,
and
right.
everyone else just had a holiday shoved somewhere for some reason, since forgotten.
Yeah, and like it's not even a holiday that we get in the UK. Like growing up in the UK, we don't get a holiday. We might recognize the birthday of the monarch, but we don't certainly don't get a day off. Which, like coming over here, I was like, what is going on here? Like this country just doesn't like working. It just wants to take
Look,
holidays all
an
the time.
excuse for a holiday.
Yeah, right. We get a holiday for a horse race, a holiday for a football event, a holiday for a monarch's birthday, whatever. Yeah. So yeah. So anyway, that sort of took off. The idea took off, and we announced the event sometime. God knows when that was. End of last year, maybe.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, it might have been around
That
about
sounds about right.
CanCon.
Yep.
Yeah, it was maybe just before CanCon. I think we might have done a Whisper campaign, and then we had some patches made up, and a few people got them at CanCon, and then we kind of properly launched just after CanCon. And yeah, the response has been really, really incredible. Like a few people said, "Oh, how many people you reckon you'll get?" And I'll be like, "I'll be happy if I get 30." Right? I'll be ecstatic if I get 30 because it's a new event. It's not in a major city. Uh, it's a long weekend, which can sometimes be good for some and not so good for others because of family commitments.
Mhm.
And at the time of recording, we are at 37, so we're really, really close to 40,
Excellent.
and 40 is a solid number for an event in its first year, especially um, as it's not being helmed by Gavi Bateman. I'm pretty happy taking over sort of the Nova Core mantle, at least for this year.
Okay. So,
Uh,
I have heard in the Infinity community about the Red K Cup, and I have not actually found out what it is. So, could you explain it to me as well, for those who don't know about it?
yeah, so the Red Key Cup comes from before my time. So I started playing
Mhm.
Infinity in 2017 or 2018, and the Red Key Cup was pretty well. If it wasn't the Red Key Cup, the idea of the Red Key was very like part of the Infinity Australia community. So I'm probably getting this wrong, so people who listen can correct me in the comments. If Andrew Noakes or Gav are listening to this, they can probably email later or correct the record. But um, way back in the early days of Infinity in one, in two, probably in two, um, there was a really large Infinity presence in Australia, and I think in no small part because there was an Australian kind of Neoterra. Anno was had many
Mhm.
Australian elements and had
Oh
many
yeah.
Australian callbacks like the bolts, Crocmen, that sort of thing. Right, there was a lot of that. So there was a strong like presence, and obviously, Australia has quite a proud sort of the Anzac tradition, and a lot of military men and women tend to play war games. So it was quite popular, and I don't know who came up with the idea or who came up with the logo, but there was maybe it was during an online campaign or during a book or whatever. CB commissioned the logo, which became the Red K Combat Group, which is designed off of a real a real Australian military logo. It's like the red kangaroo, and then they call themselves the Red K Combat Group. And I think that was something that sort of that's where it started from. I don't know how it was used or exactly, but it was a really cool like kind of nod to the Australian community that CB gave us. It ended up somewhere in the N2 or N3 rulebook, so and that was all like community started. Fast forward a few years to when events and tournaments are being run. Someone signed Red K Cup, which was um, to award the best state after any large event. And the largest event at the time was CanCon. So there was, I don't know if it ever was actually run at CanCon. I only really ever experienced it at Novacore, but I have heard that there was a Red K Cup at CanCon in maybe the year before I started playing. But essentially, what it is it's an award that's given to the best state after an event, and uh, it's worked out by the top 3 players from each state. Their results are added together, and then basically that overall result is the winner of the best state. So I think,
Excellent.
yeah. So I think in the past, the winners have been, I think, like New South Wales won it one year. Um, Rob Rob Cantrell won it for ACT at 2019, and Lockie Summer won it for New South Wales in 2022. So currently, it's sitting with New South Wales and has been since 2022. Um, hoping to take it. We're hoping for it to move to another state this year.
So the one thing I've heard is associated with this is the naming of whatever the Infinity community will determine are those squashed fried potatoes, basically.
Uh,
So are we doing that for this one, or is that more of a CanCon thing?
that is more of a CanCon thing, I believe. Yeah, the winner of CanCon
Okay.
gets to name what a potato scallop or hash or potato cake, potato crispy frisbee, fried, whatever they want to call it. That's what the Australians will officially call the name for a potato cake. That year. We haven't. I don't think there is a naming right associated with Red K Cup, other than the bragging rights of being we are the best state. Um,
Mhm.
but there was discussion about whether or not some other vernacular should be added. um,
Uh,
but yeah, yeah.
we can see what comes up at the pub afterwards.
Yes, yes, I'm sure we'll create some kind of story. A legend will be born this weekend, I reckon. Um, and there was another thing I wanted to add is initially the intention was that there would be one cup, and it would rotate every year to another state or whoever won it, and
Mhm.
it would get what's what I'm thinking of, engraved with the
Mhm.
state on it. But I guess in between the pandemic and people dropping out of the community, that just became too hard basket. So we have just gonna create a new trophy every time. And actually, I have the Red K Cup trophy sitting right next to me. That will be
Mhm.
the brand new trophy for this year. And if you know me, you know I love terrain, and you know I love turning anything into terrain that's possible. So I have for those of you who are on the video can see what the Red K Cup this year will look like, and it is a billboard. It's a lovely little billboard,
Oh,
crafted
that is
by
lovely.
Battle Kiwi, and it has on it. It does say Reke Cup 2024 Borderbash Best State, and yeah, it's crafted by Battle Kiwi. So it's a usable piece of terrain. The billboard. It also has a little light in the middle, so this will glow red in different colors. And yeah, it's really cool. I'm really, really, really happy with it. So that'll be a nice little addition to anyone's table.
Excellent. That sounds
Mm.
fun to bring back.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Hopefully,
the
hopefully
fun
we'll bring
little.
it back.
Yeah, the fun little. I mean, I don't know how it'll work because it's obviously given to a state, so
Mhm.
it'll sit on somebody's table. But I guess I think we have like in Victoria, we kind of have like our kind of standard tables that it might be
Mhm.
owned by Hugh or myself or Ryan, but they are considered Victorian. I don't think it'll matter. It'll go on whoever's table looks the best. Assuming Victoria
Yes.
wins, I don't know what's going to happen.
I didn't know there was another option.
Yeah, well, I mean, look here. It's a long time coming. I mean, if you've heard the lamentations of people like Val over the last 4 or 5 years, yeah, I think it's about time that we win something. All
Excellent.
right.
So, for Border Bash, the mission lineup we have is going to be day one, Power Pack, Acquisition, and Evacuation, followed by day two with Frontline and Supplies. So, I had a nice comment written up about Power Pack going first, and then Rob Cantrell popped up with his, or sorry, yeah, sorry, Rob Shepard. Wait,
Camtrell, yeah. I mean,
no,
he's Rob
sorry,
Shepard on
got it right.
YouTube, but yeah.
Yes, yes. Popped up with his list review for Border Bash, and one of the things he brought up as well is um, Power Pack going first is an excellent choice uh, for the same reasons I have written down. Basically, with the weird deployment zones, it is a bit more demanding on building the table specifically for those deployment zones. And by going first, then when you build the table, you can build it specifically for that, and you don't have to worry about terrain drift during the tournament.
Mhm.
Because I know when we talked about uh, ArcFest and we're comparing pictures of tables, and sometimes you go, "Here's the table I played on in round four," and the person who built the table went, "That's not the table I built."
Yeah, that happened to my table.
So Uh, other than the power pack being first to help with terrain setup, any considerations on why you picked these five scenarios?
Well, I'm gonna have to. put most of the credit towards Lockie Carter, who unfortunately won't be at the event, but he did stand up for the member for Queensland to help with the initial organization and setup of it, and yeah, basically full credit to him and his mission selection. My only real request was that we have Power Pack in there because Power Pack is a very underplayed mission for very good reason.
Mm.
But I wanted it in there, and then we kind of let Lockie run with other. I mean, to be fair, like we didn't really have a choice. As soon as, as soon as Lockie Carter, he's a confident guy. But he had a great selection of missions. Um, he he wanted to have supplies in there because supplies is a great mission. It's a tried and true mission, but it's also a very overplayed mission. But he correctly pointed out that this season, it's actually quite a different mission because of the addition of the QEZ creature. So
Yes.
that was really interesting, like observation from him. Similar to a lesser extent with acquisition. It also has a QEZ creature, so that's also quite interesting. Frontline because it's a zone control mission, but also has those new QEZ zones, which I actually have not played on this season at all. I don't know if that's just because we've forgotten about them or just have been lucky enough not to play in one. But he also pointed out that they're quite an interesting addition this season and significantly different from previous seasons where we've just had the depression zones. These
Mhm.
actually do. There's like, well, for one, there's 50% less of them on the table, and they do
Yes,
you
that helps
damage.
balance it.
Yes, exactly. There's not four of them on the table, which can be quite demanding on your list
Yes.
and a table as well. Having two is a bit nicer, and because they do you damage, it also really means you have to engage with them in a way that is like not just like running your terrain total guy through it to get a speed boost.
Well, they're not just speed bumps for models without total terrain.
Mm-hmm.
Even for models with total terrain, they provide some defense against moving straight through them.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, exactly. So picking that for frontline, and then evac was one that I think we all kind of agreed on because it has not yet been played, or you can correct me if I'm wrong, has not yet been played at a major Australian event.
I don't believe it has yet.
Yeah, it wasn't at Arc and it wasn't at CanCon, and I think it's the only two
Mhm.
major events we've had in Australia since the beginning. So
Yes. Yeah,
yeah,
because BCB follows right before the season change.
that's right. Yeah. So yeah, so it was a really nice spread of missions. In the end, we've got a nice spread of mixture of control and secure missions. We have a mixture of specialist requirements. So we've got an engineer hacker one, we've got a paramedic one, and then we've got chain of command one as well, which is unusual for it's the only one in the pack. And then we've got evac, which requires specialists but not a specific specialist, and then frontline,
Yes.
which doesn't require specialists, but because it's essentially highly classified with extra steps, you still have to prepare a list that can do a lot of things.
Yep.
So Lockie did a great job in selecting this missions, and then we kind of massaged the order. We all
Mhm.
very quickly agreed that Power Pack should be first because it's the most dick of a mission to set up for, and as you pointed out,
Mhm.
it just removes that whole like, oh, who set up this table? Oh no, we're playing Power Pack on it, and there's nothing like a great example is my compound table, with like the diamond
Mhm.
thing where there's fuck all on each like either
Yes.
flank,
Yeah.
right? So for that reason, I'm not going to set up that table on Saturday in that configuration because it's too much of a dick of a like thing to have where you're just not able. You have to use the flanks, and the flanks are kind of you're basically confined to the outside of the diamond, which could be interesting, but
Yes.
could also just be a pain.
Well, normally that table balances out because while it does have the diamond, part of that is inside each deployment zone.
Yeah,
Although the extent is a little bit asymmetrical. But with Power Pack, if you've got the diamond in the middle, no one's going to be inside, and suddenly uh, the placement of the gates and the holes of the fence become more dominating in how the game will play.
yeah, no, good point. Yeah, so
Mhm.
like for that example, I'm not going to set up that table in that configuration. I'm
Mhm.
going to do a much more generalized, rain more evenly spread type of thing. It'll still look great,
Mhm.
but it won't play in that same way.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so um, Yeah, oh yeah. I think overall, I think we nailed the lineup. I did listen to Rob's or part of Rob's
Mhm.
YouTube video that he just released on the list submissions. Big shout out to Rob and his channel. For those of you who don't know it, I'm assuming you all do. He did a list analysis for Borderbash prior to the event. So I think about half of our players submitted at least one list
Yep.
and then he's gone through and I don't know if he's analyzed them all, but he's certainly going through his highlights.
I believe he said he analyzed everyone that he received.
Yes, yeah, I think there was I received about I think I received about 12 to 15 of the
Mhm.
so actually like less than half actually. Those of you who didn't submit, I guess is either because you think you have the perfect list or you want to keep your secrets to yourself until the weekend, which is absolutely fair enough. You know, Infinity is a game of smoke and mirrors. We don't want to be giving away
Mhm.
all of our secrets, but equally, you know, if you're happy with that trade off and you get some critique from Rob, maybe that's actually worth its weight in giving away secrets. So yeah, big shout out to him. I've just listened to the first 10 minutes or 15 minutes of the episode, and it's really worth listening to. Not just for those who submitted their lists, or not just for those who are going to the event either.
Yes. Yeah, good overview of a couple different approaches on different lists, but I will leave that commentary to him in
Mm,
his video.
exactly. Yeah, go check it out.
So,
Yeah,
should we go through the scenarios?
yeah. Let's jump through them.
Okay. So, starting one, so we're starting off with Power Pack. That is the one with the weird corner deployment. So we've got three antennas on the middle line.
Oh yeah, better bring
You
up the thing.
score 1 point uh, if you have the same number, and 2 points if you have more than your opponent at the end of the game activated.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a console on either side that is in between your two corner deployment zones. 1 point for you controlling your opponents each round, and then 3 points if your opponent does not control yours at the end of the game.
Mm.
That plus two classifieds rounds up to a nice 10. Special stuff to note about the mission: it has a 16-inch wide saturation zone that runs down the middle of the board. You get an extra command token. You have a defensive turret, which I think for Power Pack, the defensive turret feels even weaker than it normally does because of the restrictive deployment zones.
Mm.
There's not a huge incentive to go straight for your opponent's deployment zones other than killing stuff. There's no scenario reason to go there, and you can't set the turret up to defend the 1 point on the battlefield that you really do want to defend, being your control, your console.
Well, it's a pretty good. You can set it up pretty well to defend that console because it's
Hmm.
you can have it in good range bands. Um,
Hmm.
defending that defending that one. But yeah, with the saturation zone meaning that it's BS10 2 dice is not as scary
Hmm.
as 3 dice. But then the 16-inch deployment zone means that you can potentially can start in better ranges earlier.
Yes.
As long as there's not a sniper on the other side of the board that's about to kill it. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's a bit different how to use it, but still potent defensive.
Yes. So as mentioned before, bonus in this one for flipping buttons and pushing buttons is chain of command. There's a special rule about overload prevention system where you can't have more than two of the three antennas activated for yourself. However, it doesn't stop you from activating your opponent's antenna and causing it to be deactivated for them, even if you can't put your token on it,
Ah.
um, which opens up some interesting possibilities for kind of offensive, like preemptive. I'm going to turn your button off because if you have two active and they have one active, they just have to activate one button and they now can get full points. Whereas if you have two active and they have one active and you deactivate theirs, now they have to activate at least one to tie instead of being up.
Yeah. No, that's a good observation.
Mhm. Uh, with the weird deployment zones, you have to remember that the backboard edge, most of your backboard edge is not your deployment zone, which means normal parachutists can come on from that.
Yeah,
Uh,
huge one. That's definitely one of the quirks and one of the perks of the mission is AD become quite can become quite effective in this scenario because of their ability to come on effectively from behind you.
mhm.
Another thing that's really quite powerful in this scenario are impersonators and infiltration, because
Yes.
being able to deploy essentially outside of your deployment zone in a corner means that you can hem in an unawares opponent, because you don't have
Mhm.
that long deployment zone where you can spread out your force. You've got two smaller deployment zones where you're most likely going to be cramped up. Depending on how the terrain's set up, you can easily place like a speculo or a Andromeda or any one of those like dangerous close assault pieces and just go for a run on your opponent, because they've got nowhere to hide. They've got nowhere to go and everything's in like template range, and yeah, go for it, go for your life. So yeah, big bonus to those types of scenario if you're going first.
Yes. True.
Have you played the scenario before?
I have played it 2 or 3 times
Yeah.
during the Slow Grow League,
Okay.
but I was playing it with vanilla as opposed to with Rama, which I'm taking to Borderbash. So yes, I did run Fidesz and um,
Algebel.
parachutists.
Oh, eventually, yeah, yeah. You bastard.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what was your kind of opinion on your take on the mission? What do you like?
Uh, it's a little weird setting it up, but once you get going, I think it works nicely, and it's a good variation from the usual. Here's my battle line. Here's your battle line.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
how many units did you deploy before you remembered that they weren't in your deployment zone?
none because I went second.
Okay, so you saw them do it, and you're like, oh yeah, go.
Yes, I saw them make the mistake and then got to change it up myself.
Yeah, like,
Yeah,
oh, I'll just put my missile launcher on this really nice rooftop, and you're like, yep, that's not in your DZ, and he's like, ah, fuck.
yeah.
It's yeah, and then when that's why setting up a table in the way thinking about power pack is so important,
Mhm.
because yeah, you can just sometimes leave an opponent, you can sometimes leave a player with like nowhere to put their stuff, or nowhere that's safe. Like, they're just decks out in the wind, or all lined up against the only wall, and then all it takes is one
Mhm.
parachutist with a shotgun to come on and and doesn't make for a very fun game.
Yes. One other thing with the weird deployment zones is it makes forward deployment a little awkward to figure out where it goes
Mm,
because it has an arced side to the forward deployment area.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
however, once you notice it, it's not that bad. Uh, you just have to find the corner deployment zone and then you sweep the 4 or 8 inch arc rather than. Um,
yeah. Because like if you imagine if you're in a Liberto with forward deployment +8, if you are going north, then you're basically almost on the middle line, but then that middle line gets further and further away the closer you are to the center. And
yeah.
then also if you're trying to defend your own beacon and only got forward deployment +8, you can't get to the beacon, can't get to your own beacon. 4 inch, you have to be there's a 4 inch dead zone in the middle if you've got forward deployment +8, but
Mhm.
obviously infiltration gets to go anywhere up to the midline. Um,
I did look at an interesting setup with a Sunduck butt. Because of the forward deployment, you could end up deploying like one one and then the decoy on either side of the objective,
oh, you
and
bitch!
they'll be just 8 inches apart.
That's yeah, right. Okay, yeah. So you could put like the decoy on one side, and that might throw your opponent for a loop because they'll see they'll go, well, okay, they're within 8 inches, so then maybe that's something in a mine, but then they're on other sides, and especially if you have
Mhm.
other camo markers on the other side, then they'll kind of like compartmentalize the deployment. They'll go left hand side, right hand
Yes.
side, and they'll just
Yeah.
see everything on the
So
left is like one lot, and yeah, right, that's fun.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. Like you'd only just be able to get it in, but you can measure that
Mhm.
deployment zone while you're deploying. So,
Yeah.
um,
Basically, if they deploy at the edge of their forward deployment area and are equidistant from your board edge, they'll be 8 inches apart.
yeah, right. That's quite that's quite hilarious. I like that. Um, One of the things I take away from this mission is, we always talk about trying to get to 10 points. This is not a mission I would get to 10 points. This is a mission that kind of caps it at 7. Because you're roll up to the because 3 of those points are tied up on dom and what's it called,
It's
at the end,
controlling your, or
enemy
is it
console.
controlling? Yeah.
Yeah, controlling
Yeah.
the enemy console at the end of each round. The likelihood of
Hmm.
you doing that is quite low. It's low. It's low if you're going second. It's nigh on impossible if you're going first.
Yeah. And if you're going second, um, you're throwing that piece away basically.
Yeah.
Don't expect it to be there for your next turn.
Yeah.
So the only way I could see reliably doing this would be if you had, like, I almost say Uberfall Commando
Mm-hmm.
could potentially do it by just throwing a Pupnik at the objective every turn.
That's true. Yeah, synchronized units, cheap units. I look at
Hmm.
it as being two things: cheap disposable units,
Hmm.
or really tough units. So like if you can put your opponent's ARO pieces down, and you can like walk a tag across the table and then set it in suppressive fire on it, and you're
Hmm.
confident that you can protect it from warbands and arrows, then yep, you can do that. But that's 1 point that you're going to get. Obviously, if you can do it for more than one turn, you get it for 2 points.
Hmm.
But I think that realistically the chance of you doing that is pretty small. Um, the only time you'll be doing it is on the very last round of the game, in which case
Hmm.
you get 3 points, or sorry, you will get a point, and you may get 3 points if your opponent hasn't also got your own console
Well,
controlled.
remember that point for controlling the opponent's console on turn 3 isn't 1 point. It's 1 point for you and denies them 3 points.
That's right. Denies them 3 points,
Hmm.
which is the other interesting way of looking at this mission. Is some of the way
Hmm.
you get points isn't that those points isn't that you get points, you just deny your
Hmm.
opponent through. Um,
Yes.
so I like to think like that those 3 points are kind of almost not really worth getting.
Hmm.
So it's more like a 7-0, like a 7 point game. I mean, I guess
Yeah.
technically an 8 point game, but a seven. Well, I guess actually you're right, because if you do control it, oh no, sorry, if not neither of you control it, you're getting 3 points anyway.
Yes.
Yeah. So
If neither controls either, both players get 3 points. If you control theirs, you get 1 point, but they lose 3 points.
they lose 3 points. Yeah. So it's a good idea to try and get a swing there. But if you
Mhm.
can focus on keeping your own one free of any of any opponent, of any foes,
Mhm.
focus on getting your two classifieds, and then focus on getting more activated consoles in the manner that you did. That'll get you. That'll net you 7 points.
Yeah.
So it'll be like a
Which will put you
seven.
comfortably across the 5 point line.
Yeah, and I think that's what you need to aim for. I played games of a power pack where it's ended 7-5 because we've both gotten our classifieds. I've gotten more buttons
Mhm.
pushed, but we neither of us have gotten our consoles. So it's a 7-5 win.
Mhm.
So I think the emphasis for me is to try and get those classifieds done. So having range of specialists that can do them, and then also just being able to either murder your opponent and so that they can't push the button, or have like a pocket specialist that can come on the third turn and flip a console back towards you, or deactivate your opponent's console to get um, those 2 points. Rob,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
said that Rob mentioned that going first is. Did he say it was better, or did he say it was fairly balanced?
Oh, I think it's just not the player going first, but it being first in the tournament.
Mm. Right. Sorry. Yes. Yes. Yes.
for the reason of setup and terrain,
Mm, mm.
to make sure that the setup is good for it and not um, hasn't drifted throughout the game as people have bumped terrain in the corners.
Yeah. Fair. Yeah. Do you have a particular opinion on which one you think is, if you think going first or second, this one is better?
Oh, um, I think there are definite advantages to going second, just because it makes it controlling your opponent's objective or console at the end of a turn is potentially viable for second player,
Mm-hmm.
but it's almost impossible for first player. Uh, that said, it's also a mission where it's more difficult to ARO because of the sat zone.
Yeah.
So if you're going second, you're going to have a more difficult time preventing your opponent's alpha coming in because they're going to be able to select better routes to use the sat zone against you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's sort of it's I think it's mainly balanced. One of the things I would talk
Mhm,
about what you said there about the
mhm,
about arrows being not so good. Yeah, in Sat Zone
mhm,
obviously takes your big swinging dick arrow missile launcher a bit inert,
mhm,
right? Being burst one, it doesn't help. And because it's encompasses a lot of the board, it is going to get shot. It works both ways, but taking someone from burst 4 or burst 5 down to burst 3 or 4 is not so bad as taking someone from burst 1. So yes, you're right,
mhm,
that will make arrows harder, but I still think that this is a mission that
mhm,
going first can be really strong, because the way that the deployment zones are set up, you can, with a mobile enough army or a forward deploying army, can just
yes.
encircle one half of the table, like one deployment
Mhm,
zone, and just prevent them from getting out or destroy everything in there. Basically,
mhm,
split them off, destroy one half of the army,
mhm,
and the other half of the army is kind of sitting in the other corner going, "Oh no, what's happened?" Um,
mhm,
that's really good if you have the tools to be able to strike hard. Because obviously, if you're the
mhm,
one going first, you're the one, yeah, like you say, who can navigate through those arrows, through the sat zone, 16 inches up the table. So sometimes murder is a really handling this mission.
mhm,
But as you said, going second, your ability to walk on a specialist, or sorry, walk on a AD trooper on the backboard edge at the end of the game when all of
mhm.
your stuff's on the other side of the table, and just touch the button, touch the console,
Yeah.
and get those points.
Mhm,
Get a point, but also prevent your opponent from getting three is pretty big.
mhm,
And being able to flip, have the last say on flipping a button, get those
yes.
potentially 2 points, is also big. So I think
Mhm,
it's quite well balanced, but I think when I look at that, I think to myself that it's not a mission that I want to null. Not really a mission I want to null deploy. Depending on
no.
my opponent, if I'm going second and my opponent, it looks like my opponent is like a combined army player, for example, or
Mhm,
something with lots of threat projection.
mhm,
I don't necessarily want to null deploy because they'll just outmaneuver me and put me in a position where I can't even leave.
mhm,
But then similarly, if I'm going first and my opponent looks like they're an army that maybe doesn't have the best defense, and when I'm talking about defense, I'm talking about like
mhm.
mine layers, war bands,
Yep.
smoke. Maybe they have a good aero piece, but that's not so good. That's not so. I'm not so worried
Mhm,
about that. Then I would be quite confident in murdering, going hard on the
mhm,
murder and working on buttons like.
mhm.
It's a cool mission.
Yep. I think with the small deployment zones, table side can also be more impactful.
Mm. Yep.
Um, you also, sorry, not to dwell on this too long, but it is one of the big ones. You mentioned the first player can target one of the opponent's DZs to try to wipe it out. The second player can try to counter that by seeing where the first player has deployed the majority of their stuff and deploy it on the opposite corner.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can then get a position where you're both doing a refused flank, and
Mhm.
you just kind of swap positions. Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess because of the size of the deployment zone, then yeah, it depends on what's in there, which I
Mhm.
guess is all part of the mission, part of the table designers mission to make it usable.
Yes. Yeah. So mission number 2 is acquisition. That's the one with 2 buttons and a box on the center line. Uh, all of its end game scoring: 2 points per activated antenna, 1 point per controlled antenna, 3 points for controlling the tech coffin, and 1 classified objective. Uh, Special stuff about the mission: again, 16-inch deployment zones like the previous. There is a QAZ creature, and engineers and hackers both get bonuses for flipping the buttons. Uh, Honestly, it's simple, it's good, it's one of the, I want to say, like, gold standard for no frills but solid scenarios.
Well, there's a reason
It's
why uplink center is what I'm thinking of, direct action
direct action.
mission,
Yes.
which is just a
Yeah.
riff on this.
Yeah. This is probably one of my go-to scenarios for this, or uplink center for new players.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, I dig this mission. I think that it's a really well balanced mission. The difference between the choice between violence
mhm,
or waiting until or survival, offense and defense is a really interesting one
mhm,
because it's all at end of game scoring, so you can just kill, play annihilation with extra steps. But
mhm,
because it's end of game scoring, if you think you can survive until turn 3 and just be around to push a couple of buttons and be in base contact with the console, then you win.
mhm.
So I,
Yeah.
I, I really like that.
I think we mentioned about QAZ creatures kind of mixing stuff up. I think with this one, yeah, same. Um, you can put it to guard one of the objectives in an awkward position, and kind of force your opponent to play the table differently than it looked when it started.
Yeah, and because there isn't much of an incentive to push a button early in this mission, so you
Hmm.
will probably want to go after that QAZ creature as soon as possible.
Hmm.
Um, but then obviously you still have to spend resources in getting rid of it, and depending
Yep.
on where your opponent's hitting it and what resources you've got to get rid of it, it could be a bit of a point sink, a bit of an order sink. Because of the 16 inches EZs, this is the one mission where
Mhm.
you can deploy the QEZ creature 4 inches outside of your opponent's. Normally, it's 8 inches. I wouldn't typically recommend doing that because it can just be quite inconsequential for an opponent just to get rid of the creature with an impetuous order if it's only
Mhm.
4 inches outside the DZ. Although, and because they go down before any other models go down, it's pretty easy to
Mhm.
just sidestep it. Um,
Yes. The
yeah,
one exception I could see to that is if your opponent has a really good fire base just inside their DC.
mm,
It could be tempting to toss the QAZ creature down to cover that fire base at before they deploy, and force them to either put a fire team there where they want it, but have to deal with the QAZ creature before they activate it, or place their fire team in the second best place.
yeah, and I think that'll definitely come down to, did your opponent bring a warband? Like, did they bring
Yes.
something that can deal with a QEZ
Mhm.
creature effectively?
Mhm.
Because you're not going to be. I mean, again, depending on terrain placement, you're not going to be putting that QEZ creature in the open where it can just get like shot from
Yes.
like
Yep.
outside of 8 inches. You're going to be putting it in a
Mhm.
nook. It's S1, so it can hide in these little corners, crevices.
Mhm.
Be projecting a threat onto a rooftop, and then you have to go. Well, now I have to put my Datarazi whatever it is
Yeah.
there because it needs to get rid of this fucking QAZ creature.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, no, that's a good point. It's yeah,
No, I
it's
agree.
yeah,
Most of the time, it's bad to try to push the QAZ creature into your opponent's deployment zone because it just makes it easier to take out.
like there's not often I can't think of many instances where like there's a warband that's not gonna be able to tangle with it. I mean, the QAZ creature might get lucky,
Uh,
right?
I'd say warbands that don't have martial arts, but then again, if it's cheap enough and it's got a CC of 20 or
Yeah,
better, yeah, you're just hoping that it doesn't pass an armor save or two because it's probably DA.
yeah, that's right. So yeah,
Mhm.
it is definitely better to have it like 4 inches
Mhm.
away from one of those objectives so that it
Mhm.
takes a little bit longer for it to be excuse me for it to be dug out.
Yep.
Yeah, no, it's a solid mission. I've got really nothing
Mhm.
too much more to add on that one. Day two, sorry, round two. So after lunch,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yep.
the objectives basically stay where they are in the middle, and we just remove
Mhm.
the ones at either side.
Mhm.
That's easy.
And then end of day one will be evacuation. So 5 civilians, 4 HVTs, and 2 extraction consoles.
yeah,
Uh, 1 point per extracted civilian, 2 points per extracted enemy HVT, and one classified.
yeah, not the easiest sort of table to set up um, after round two, but the way that I see it is we will just let players
Mhm.
place the civilians.
I think that's going to be the best because then if terrain needs to be moved to legally place the civilians, they can agree on how to shift it, and anything that they've shifted can be reset Sunday morning.
Yeah, true. Um, yeah, I think that if every player brings at least what four, well, I guess they have to bring 5 civilians each, then you've definitely got enough.
Mhm.
Um, we'll have some on hand as well to supplement. I would
Mhm.
recommend that players differentiate between the HVTs and civilians because they are worth different points, and you don't want to be
Mhm.
picking up what you think is an HVT and then realize no, that's my civvy. So yeah, players remember, I don't know, just color them differently or use a different faction. If you play
Mhm.
nomads, bring some Pano troopers or something with you, and then they'll be easy to recognize civilians, and then your normal HVTs that you use in all your other games. The point you made actually about the terrain moving is a good one. Um,
Mhm.
I don't want to move terrain too much.
Mhm.
And I know the rules for HVTs, or sorry, the rules for civilians are the same as
Mhm.
HVTs in that they have to be placed not on or in terrain. But I
Mhm.
will happily make an exception for this mission, provided the placement is still accessible for both players.
Most of the times I've played this, none have been perfect for setting up civilians, but usually I've it's been fairly equal. Like this civilian ends up slightly further in, but the one opposite it also ends up slightly further in, or the slight adjustments with civilians end up mostly balancing out. And if it's really bad, then you can also fudge the terrain slightly.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
I agree. Also, if it's easily accessible, then you could probably agree with your opponent that uh, this position of the civilian is equivalently accessible to if it was on open ground.
yeah, and also that comes down to then that make the role for sides more important, right? Because
Mhm.
these are just like these are treated not really any differently to how you would treat an objective, right? Sometimes objectives are
Yes.
placed on rooftops. As long as they're accessible,
Mhm.
then that's just how it lies. So the rules
Mhm.
probably should be the same for civilians. And I'd also argue HVTs, but because you have more agency on where you place HVTs, then
Yes.
usually you have there's more places there is there is always more places where you can place them. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, because these are fixed, I would generally just say, you know, it And if it means you have to move the table too much and there's bridges and all that sort of stuff you're moving
Mhm.
in the result, then just put it on the building as long as you.
Yeah.
And yeah, that keeps it. That makes my job easy too.
Mhm. Yeah. Some stuff on the mission that can be overlooked. The extraction consoles are neutral. So
Mm,
even though there's one at the edge of your deployment zone and one at the edge of the opponent's deployment zone, uh, both players can use either console,
yeah,
which means you have to be more careful about where you place your HVTs, because if you place your HVTs centrally, they might be easy to just grab and extract from the opponent's console.
yeah, and that also means that you have to think about defending, not just defending your HVTs and civilians, but also potentially defending
Mhm.
your console.
Yeah. Yep.
So
If you
have
leave it
eyes on it.
open,
Yeah,
then
which also then means like comes back to your choice of site, right? Is that extractions console on a side of a wall that you can't see? You know, is it on?
yes.
Can you know? Yeah, do you have eyes in it or don't you? That might
Mhm.
make your decision or sides.
Yeah.
This is
One
also.
other
Oh yeah, go ahead.
oh, one other thing to note with this, CivEvac changed in ITS 15. Civilians no longer go hostile if you fail a CivEvac. So you always get to try to CivEvac them on whip +3. You don't have to deal with different modifiers if you have passed or failed the roll.
And I think that's a good idea. I think that's a good change, at least for this scenario specifically, because it is
Yes.
such an order intensive mission. The fact that you already have to go back to your console and then pass another whip roll.
Yes.
Yeah, failing a whip roll multiple times is not a fun experience.
I can think of which game you might be. uh, yeah, considering to score all the points for extraction requires 14 skill checks, uh, not including that you have to move them, get to them, and move them back. So that's a full turn's worth of orders, uh, just on scenario checks or skill
Mm,
checks. Uh,
effective.
that said, um, this is another scenario that probably don't expect to get tens on it.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think that's a really good point because like sometimes you can be blinkered by a mission by thinking you can get to 10
mhm,
points and then just kind of being annoyed that it's so hard to get to 10.
mhm.
And you're like, dude, just get to 5. 5 is
Yes.
all you need. That's a
Yep.
major. Just get to 5. And then you see that the insurmountable hell is quite achievable. Um,
Mhm,
yeah. I think I've only played this mission twice, I think. And yeah,
mhm.
they've never. I think the highest was maybe 7 somebody got, which was what, two two HVTs and then 3
Two
civilians.
civilians and classified. Yeah.
Or maybe it was 2 HVTs, 2 civilians, and a classified, something like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's doing well. Like that's both
Mhm,
HVTs, both civilians, and 3 civilians.
mhm.
That's a lot of skill checks.
Yeah. In this, realistically, to hit um, 5 points, you should be targeting an opponent's HVT, unless they have greatly forgotten about the civilians and left them undefended on their side.
Yeah, because if you can get an HVT early, that's 2 points up. They then have to
Yeah.
get your HVT or 2 civilians in order to draw
Mhm.
equal. And then it's usually fairly easy for you to get your own civilians because they are
Yes.
just sort of outside your D. Like it takes orders,
Mhm.
but it's not that difficult.
Well, they're only 4 inches outside your DZ.
Yeah. So one one
So
one one
if you're going
movement.
first, you can set up a 4/4 specialist to walk and civivac with the first order.
Really? They're too
There's
far away. They're
it's
too far away, aren't they?
no,
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
they're at
sorry. Yeah,
they're 8 inches. The cusp of their base is 8 inches from your DZ. Oh, sorry, 8 inches,
4 inches from your DZ.
16 inches from your board edge, and you have a 12-inch deployment zone. So they're four
Yes.
inches from your deployment zone edge.
Yes, my bad. Yes, I can't count.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's dead right. Um, I think
Mhm.
yeah, I think just aiming for an enemy HVT and then two of your own civilians and you're classified, that's 5. If you can
Mhm.
fight for that middle civilian, then
Mhm.
that's 6. That's a bonus. But I think if you can um yeah, just try to get an enemy HVT. And in the game we played, Nick, I could not get to your
Mhm.
civilians, sorry, your HVTs because the way
Mhm.
that the terrain was set up on the side that you
Mhm.
chose. Actually, I chose my sides. I didn't even know. I didn't even think about this. Was that both of your HVTs could be placed on the other side of a shipping container, which just kind of made it nigh on impossible for me to get there and then get across to either
Yeah.
your console or my console. Just the
Mhm.
amount of orders it took. I had an idea where if I put my civilians near my HVTs, it would be
Mhm.
less eyes I'd need to have on things. Like I could just focus
Yes.
on
Oh yeah.
focus on two areas. But when you've got smoke and
Mhm.
I didn't, and then you just kind of smoke and
Mhm.
grab one and pull away. So there's
Yes.
definitely some nice uh interesting angles to come at
Mhm.
this mission. I think, which make it an interesting mission, but a tough one.
Yeah, definitely a few ways to approach it, especially when you get to the placement of HVTs, because, like I said, in the game we played, I placed mine both together because there was a very defensible spot for them. Another game I played of it, I ended up putting my HVTs far apart, but just near board edges. So it was going to take as many orders as possible to get them from where they started to a console.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
But I
think
did
that's a good
like
one.
your idea of putting some of them near civilians that you're going to defend anyways, so that you have to focus on less areas of the board.
Yeah, especially if like if, you've got one civilian on one side of the building, and then you
Mhm.
then have to put your HVT on the other side of the building. Then you have to have two models watching both those areas. Whereas I could just
Mhm.
put them sort of next to each other and just have one model or two models watching both, and
Mhm.
that just gives you layered defense. That's really important in this mission, I
Mhm.
think, to have layers of defense. Have your arrows standing up, have your flash pulse bots, have your mines, have your repeaters, your hackers, anything in
Mhm.
which to make it as inefficient as possible for your
Which
opponent to get.
bleed orders.
Yeah,
If you can bleed orders off of them, this mission becomes very difficult fast.
yeah, absolutely. It is a mission. It is also a mission as well. You
Mhm.
can just go and murder for the first 2 turns if you can. If you can. The exclusion zone is a hindrance and a help, right? Because it means that you're not going to have to encounter camo markers in the midfield, but equally you
Mhm.
won't have your own camo markers in the. This is another mission actually that would benefit impersonators with smoke. Today's speculos, they can already deploy right next to the
Mhm.
civilian. They can throw smoke,
Mhm.
grab them, and run back. And then maybe next turn they can hand it off to a specialist and get rid of them.
Mhm.
Or they can go into your DZ and start stabbing the specialist that you need mission with. Because this
Yes.
is this is definitely a mission where if you can kill their specialist or they don't have enough specialists, then they lose. They cannot. They can get on 1 point.
Yes. Yeah. If you can go first and alpha their specialists off the board, you win.
Yeah, actually, this is probably the only mission of the weekend where if you don't have specialists, you cannot win. Well, unless you don't have specialists and
Oh,
you
unless you
murder.
counter alpha and then to kill all their specialists,
Yeah,
and then it's who can complete their classified and guess what the opponent's is and stop them.
yeah, yeah. Then you're just like fighting for a
Mhm.
1-all draw. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's not how I would do that mission, but that's certainly an option.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, specialists are super important in this mission. Make
Yeah.
sure you have
Uh,
plenty of them.
yes. As a side note, if you're not looking to go for a sportsmanship score, you can civivac your own HVTs into better positions.
You can.
There's nothing that's stopping you from civivacing your HVTs
Oh
like a normal
yes,
game.
yeah. Sorry, I was thinking
You
whether or
can't
not
you can't get them off the board, but you can civivac them
that'd be
into
the only
even
thing.
more awkward places for your opponent.
Can you? I actually look at this up. Is the HVT treated the same as the civilian? Is it treated the same as an HVT? So can you
For what
civivac? Can you
purposes?
civivac the civilians or just your own HVT? Oh no,
Uh,
of course you can
y-
because they're yeah because
yeah, they're all
they're everyone's. Yeah, true.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's true.
Mhm,
Yeah, and I've definitely seen that done in what was it? Unmasking. Unmasking. It's a common,
mhm.
well, not common, but it's a
Yeah.
fairly popular tactic of
Mhm.
first
It's a
turn. Just
viable tactic, yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
just grab the decoy or grab the designated target of a vacuum and
Mhm,
put him far away in your corner as possible.
mhm,
Yeah, so definitely that's an option for this one too. Yeah.
mhm.
All right. And then
So, that'll end our
day.
first day. We will all be exhausted and go collapse at the pub.
Yeah, actually,
And then
quick.
come back fresh for Frontline.
Yeah, I was going to say a quick plug actually for
Mhm,
Saturday for anyone listening to this on the drive to Albury. We will be going to the pub afterwards. 7 p.m. We have booking at the Bended Elbow, which is it's a pub. It's a nice pub apparently. I've been to Albury a couple of times. It's a really nice little city. One of our TOs who partner lives there or comes from there recommended this pub. So have the whole upstairs function room to ourselves where we can properly nerd out on a Saturday night. Good. Yeah, looking forward to that.
excellent.
Always look forward to the Saturday debrief where you can relax with a beer and discuss unbridled
Mm.
about the day. Yeah, definitely looking.
So, we'll come back on Sunday and start off with Frontline. That's the area control mission with stripes. Uh, so again, all end of game. Closest stripe to you dominate for one. Middle stripe dominate for two. Far stripe dominate for three. And then change up this year. We've got 4 classifieds on this one. So like you said, it's highly classified plus extra steps of area control. Uh, Other mission stuff. The normal zone domination, Shazvasti, baggage. As mentioned before, there's quantum anomaly zones, which I think for this one will I like them. I like the concept of them in this one because you want to move up to score points. The way you move up, you have options, but the quantum anomaly zones, then you can play with your opponent's options on moving up the field.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
There's there.
get
I haven't had much in the way of to do with these, so
Mhm,
I'm in keen to see what part they play. I do know
mhm,
there is a contingent of the community that does not chooses to play with
mhm,
these
mhm,
templates, and that's I guess up to
mhm.
you guys. You can have a gentleman's agreement, but like to see act this season.
I like the quantum anomaly zones better than the terrain zones from previous seasons, just because they feel like they're more strategic. Uh, Prior seasons where we've put out 4, like 2 each, uh, sat zones, and you just end up with it just slows the game. It doesn't feel like it's as impactful as it just bleeds orders from everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Quantum Anomaly Zone, there's only 2 of them, so you can be more strategic where you place it. You're not going to end up with a wall of sat zone across the table, and it forces your opponent to go to it forces your opponent to assess how they're going to deal with it, regardless of the model they want to move up, because even train 0G or train total still take damage from moving through it.
That's right. It's only damage 10 on your BTS, but
Mhm.
that's that's still uh,
It's a lot of times that's a die toss or
yeah,
this coin flip.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. It's yeah, it's so the old way of doing that was so annoying.
Mhm.
4 of them just looked so crowded on a table at times. Um, and it was kind of like it just felt yeah, it's overly impactful and not that fun. To I think a bit more strategic. Definitely put them in a position which might be beneficial for you
Mhm.
without just kind of being an area of no go. So yeah, I'm
Yes.
quite, and I think they have clarified the language on it this year where it says they cannot be overlapping. Um,
I think so, but they can still be touching. I think
right. Okay.
so. That really doesn't matter.
Yeah,
You could put them close enough that it doesn't matter if they're touching or not.
yeah, it cannot be overlapped with an.
Mhm. Which probably is good because then you don't have to have the question of, do I take 2 damage if I'm in 2 zones?
Oh, that
Because
would
if they're not
suck.
touching, then you definitely are in two. You go through 2 different zones that are independent of each other. Whereas if they were overlapping, you might have the question of,
Oh no, I
uh,
didn't think about that.
is it
Yeah,
doubly? Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah,
But
actually,
to
good
do that,
question.
you and your opponent have to agree that when you place them, they go next to each other. So at that point, you both decided that you really hate one area of the board and don't want to play with it.
Yeah, for sure. That would suck.
So additionally, with this, we've got a defensive turret, and we've got Intelcom card support and control. So this one I have seen misplayed, and I am sure I have misplayed it before. Um, Especially that this has 4 classifieds now. So
Mm.
the very first classified card you pull, when you decide that you are selecting that one before you pull your second classified card, you declare whether the first one is going to be points or a classified.
Yeah, before beginning of the game, but after choosing the first classified object.
Yes.
Right, yes, you don't get to
Uh,
choose the worst card out of the four.
Correct.
Eh.
And you don't get to know what the rest of them are either
Mm.
before you decide whether you're banking it for points or if you're keeping it.
Yeah.
I did have one question that you might know the answer to. When do you declare that you are using them? Is it before or after you've calculated points for zones?
Um,
Because I thought it was before you calculate points for zones, but I reread it today
no, it's
and it
after.
sounds, yeah.
Yeah, I think in my experience, and I can read it again, but
Mhm,
yeah, it's at the end of the last game round when the players count up their points and in initiative
mhm,
order, the player can use
mhm,
their Intel Com card in support and control.
mhm,
So if we have both done it,
mhm.
um, then like because I don't think it matters if only I've done it, then I guess I just get
Well,
to choose at what point like when I do it.
uh, but for that, I mean, you total up the points in each zone and then declare where your card goes versus declaring where your card goes and then counting up points in the zone.
I yeah I've always. Oh, now you're asking me now. How have I always played it? In the few times I've done it, I feel like
Mhm,
I've done it in areas where we hadn't already worked out what it was because the card you've got is also hidden. It's sort of effectively hidden information, right? Your opponent doesn't know
mhm,
what that the value of that card is.
mhm,
So because this is when the players count up their points. So
mhm,
you have to so you count up your points, Nick. I count up my
mhm,
points,
mhm.
and then I would say I'm going to use Intelcom. Then I would add it. Then we would reveal our points.
Okay.
Generally speaking,
Mhm,
um, yeah. But if both of us had that, then it would
mhm,
be you would have to
mhm.
reveal it in initiative order. But
Correct.
it's hard to ascertain because often when you're doing
Mhm,
it, you just kind of go, "Oh yeah, I've got
mhm,
some you might just blurt out and say, "Oh yeah, I've got like 50 points in this."
mhm,
And you can go, "Oh, well, he's got 50. I've definitely got less than 50."
mhm,
Um whereas you might not have known. Yeah, I think hmm. Yeah, okay. No, that's a good one. I'm not too sure. I would say that it is after you've counted up your points in that zone
mhm,
and then you yeah, I don't know. Yeah, cuz it depends on how you and your opponent
mhm.
do it.
Well, because the 2 ways that I could see it coming out, and both seem to agree with the wording, would be, uh, each player counts up the number of points they have in each zone, assigns their Intelcom card to one of their zones, and then everyone reveals how many points they have in each zone. The other way I could see it done is everyone totals up all their points in each zone. Both players know each total for each zone, and then in initiative order can put their card down.
Yeah.
Mm.
I
So I guess it comes down to, do you get to know your opponent's point totals before or after you've placed your card?
mm. No, that does make a difference, doesn't it? Yeah.
Mhm,
Because if you don't know beforehand, then you
mhm,
have to guess which one you want to put it into,
mhm,
which I think is slightly less impactful than if you both have the card. But most of the time,
mhm.
unlikely both people have the card. Yeah, okay. No, it's I will take that away to the brains trust because I do not know the answer to that question. But good question.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, excellent. We have a few days to figure it out.
Yeah. Um. Speaking about timing,
Mhm.
what's come to my mind here is in what order do you place the QEZ zones in the defensive turret?
I believe. Uh, I think for the turret, it's whoever kept deployment,
Hit deployment is the first place.
and
Yeah, the same for both.
uh, okay.
So in that case, it doesn't really
Oh.
matter. Yeah, whoever kept deployment places both of them, and then whoever got initiative places. So basically, the person
Mhm.
who places initiative can, in some ways, counter the defensive turret with a nom.
Yes.
Yeah, so the player who's going
Uh,
first can.
Now I have to look up anomaly zones since I'm curious what happens if. Oh no, because your turret can't be in an anomaly zone, so never mind. That doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, because they've got to be inside the DZ, and the normally zone has to be
Mhm.
outside the DZ. But yeah,
Outside.
you can. Yeah,
Yeah.
if you kept deployment, Nick, you would place your
Mhm.
deploy your anomaly zone and your turret, and then I would place my turret and my anomaly zone, and I could put my anomaly zone in front of your turret just to make it -1 burst, which you know isn't bad when turrets kill things in my experience.
Yes. And surprisingly, things that they usually shouldn't, and
Hmm.
then they will fail against the weakest line infantry and get totaled by a grunt with a pistol.
Yes, that is generally how things go with those things. Um,
So,
anything
final
else?
scenario. Oh,
Uh, yeah, I
sorry.
think no, I don't think I've got much else to say on it. I mean, frontline people know about it. Do watch out for
Mhm,
Shazvasti rule and baggage if you are a combined army player.
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
that may come in handy if you have
mhm.
Deskin in your list and you put her unconscious but didn't put her dead. That's a 54 point model just sitting in a zone that really should die. Make sure you do that. Double tap always.
Uh, Yes. I'm not sure I know many players who would leave Shreskin unconscious, um, just on principle. You're like, I don't know if they have a medic, but I don't know. Do they even have a parachutist medic? Doesn't
Mm,
matter. Just make sure she's dead, and then you don't have to worry about it.
yeah. I don't tend to see too many doctors in combined army in my experience. They
Mhm,
are fairly rare. Um,
mhm,
fairly rare. Paramedics, yeah, a Rendak perhaps. Seed
mhm,
soldiers, nah. Maybe a Rendak,
mhm.
but it's fairly.
Doctor Worm.
Yeah, even Doctor Worm. I don't see Doctor Worm very often in combined army lists.
Mhm.
Although you might see it in this one because nice segue into the final mission.
Yes. Supplies.
Okay,
So, three
sorry.
boxes. Grab them, hold them, uh, and then score them at the end of the game. So 2 points per box you control, 1 point for having more boxes than your opponent, 1 point if your opponent has 0 boxes, and then 2 classifieds. Other mission stuff: QAZ creature, Doctor Paramedic bonus, and another Intelcom. But this is one of the This is Intelcom counter espionage. One of the rules that I do not like, for reasons that I can mention in a moment. Uh, so counter espionage: if you do a classified with the plus symbol on it and your opponent does a classified with the X symbol on it, theirs doesn't count.
Yep. We all collectively hate this one. Although I can't find it in the ITS document. Am I blind? Doctors, specialists, controlling. Wait a minute. Unless they've removed it from mission.
Don't think so.
I'm just
Oh,
looking at.
very, very bottom after QAZ creature on the second page, 53.
Oh. I
Keep
got
going
an.
up. Keep going up. Under the
Oh,
QAZ
right.
creature.
There it is. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. I see. That freaking
Yep.
thing. Yeah, it sucks. No one remembers to do it. And then if you do remember to do it, you feel dirty because
Yes.
you're like, hey, I win.
Wow. Look, by complete chance, I happened to do this weird, obscure rule, and you lost because of it. Sorry.
Yeah, that is. It sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've lost a game because of it.
You have.
I've lost a tournament because of it.
Oh, was that the one? Was that Arc when you were playing Luke? I think he said that. Did you?
No, that
No.
was at uh tabletop games. Or no, sorry, throw the dice.
Throw the dice. Right.
Um I would yeah. Rama was undefeated playing Rama on the top table, and it was a tie at the end of the game, except for an Intelcom bonus.
Guts.
Yeah, it was.
Guts, bro.
Yeah,
Sucks. Yeah. Oh well. Yeah. Hopefully, I mean, we are reminding our listeners now that this exists, but also
yes,
forget that it exists.
yes.
Unless you're on top, I guess
Uh,
if you're on top table, hell, if you're
oh yeah,
if you're happy tanking a sports score, then go for it.
no, honestly, if it happens, it, it shouldn't be a sports score thing. You're just using the rules as printed and um, knock the Doc's Corvus
Yeah.
Belli a point for.
Yeah, it's so you're looking for any classified with the first aid symbol on it,
Yeah.
Red
Um,
Cross.
which those are on all the like doctory paramedicy ones, which you're gonna want anyways because you have a doctor paramedic bonus so you took lots of them. I don't recall what the X symbol is. I'd have to look it up.
Yeah, it's like the reticule, so maybe I don't know what it corresponds to. It could be hacking, forward observe,
Mm,
maybe.
Yep. Mm.
All right.
So another good stable mission, a little shaken up this year because of QAZ creatures. I have not played it yet in ITS 15, so I'm curious to see how those play out in changing up how supplies plays.
Yeah, and
Have
then
you done any supplies with QAZ creatures yet?
uh, yeah, I think one game with it, and yeah, like again going back to what Lockie had said when we were making this mission pack, very insightful. I was kind of against supplies because I play it just gets played at every major event, and when he
Mhm,
mentioned that it does change how you approach it with the QAZ creature, yeah, really made me go, oh yeah, actually no, this could really change how a list is
mhm,
designed for supplies because for those of you who don't really know what we're talking about, like in days gone, well, the common way of looking at supplies is um, you will have an element of your army, not the major element, but an element that will be dedicated at extracting a supply box and then hiding. Right?
mhm,
It will be like an SAS, Hunzakut, or any kind of like cheap midfield skirmisher.
mhm.
Well, their job will
Specialist.
be that's a specialist, yes, especially specialist.
Mhm,
That
mhm,
will on the first turn usually grab one of those boxes, the easiest one for them to get to, and run the fuck away with it. And that's kind of what they are there for. And then generally you fight over the other two. The main part of your
mhm,
army goes and punches your opponent in the face. Then you just try and keep this guy
mhm,
safe, and then fight for that second one so that you can have more, or kill your opponent's box carrier. Um,
mhm.
that was typically how saw that mission played, like you could go harder on either way. You could just not pick up something and just go hard on the killing, or you could go more on the picking up boxes and pick up two or even all three. Um,
Mhm,
but then at the that then you lose the sort of killing potential, which means your opponent
mhm,
can counterpunch you, and if they're going second, it means that they can then just kill your box carriers at the end and win that way.
mhm.
So with this year with the QEZ creature is you can't just have that unsupported specialist grabbing a box, because that box may be protected by a QEZ creature, and if you want to avoid that, you then have to bring a tool to remove that QEZ creature first, or
Mhm,
have more have more specialists that I guess can go and grab other boxes, although that's not a
mhm,
particularly stable idea because generally, there will be areas of the board that your opponent is watching. The way that the table's set up, there will be
mhm.
boxes that are being watched. So, and your opponent will generally then put their QEZ creature so that it can reach out and touch two boxes, or it'll be in the area where they don't have as many eyes to. That might be
Yes.
perceived as your easier route to getting a box.
Yeah, I could see that being the biggest change because a lot of times, once you've picked board sides, one side can see two boxes and one side can see one.
Mm-hmm.
And the QAZ creature will help balance the box that you can't get eyes on and stop your opponent from doing, say, a turn one. The model I always think of with supplies is the Dynamo Paramedic. Just because move up, smoke the box, move up again, grab it, and be back, and you're down like 3 to 4 orders,
Mm.
and have a box in the back of your DZ.
Yeah.
But that can't survive a QAZ creature.
No,
So
and
you have to go out, clear the QAZ creature, or deal with the box that your opponent can defend from their deployment zone.
yeah, which then calls into, does your army have access to a disposable warband, a 5 point,
Yep.
10 point warband with martial arts or some kind of high CC stat
Hmm.
that can kill a QEZ creature reliably? Um,
Hmm.
I've had a game before where my opponent wasted two orders trying to kill it with a beast hunter, only for the beast hunter to die, and then spend a further three orders trying to kill a QEZ creature with a Yotum. Um, Before like it eventually killed the QEZ creature, but the Yotum was on one wound. Uh, you know,
Yeah.
that's like just turn one gone because like and the beast hunter is a good candidate for it, but because it's only CC 21, it's just susceptible to just a low roll, and the QEZ creature
Mhm.
just needs to at once. Got three burst and it's
Uh,
BS11, CC11.
my favorite QAZ creature story was against Val. He moved up his dog warrior and was going to try to do the QAZ creature with the dog warrior because either um, he takes a wound and he transforms, so yay, want to do that anyways, or he kills the QAZ creature. Um, Turns out the QAZ creature put him unconscious
Yeah, I've heard. Just
because it hit 3 times and he did not save any.
it's yeah, it's just like the same story we hear about the defensive turrets. Sometimes they just go off.
Mhm,
Sometimes they just high roll, and yeah, then you have to
mhm,
decide what to do about that. Now, actually,
mhm,
an interesting tactic came. Josh mentioned this, and I
mhm,
did after he mentioned it. I did a little bit of searching on the
mhm.
forums and Discord for an answer to this. And okay, turns out he's right. So you can discover yourself if you are a camel marker. Um, so what
Well,
I'm
you just you can declare discover against anything you can see as a camo marker to decamo yourself.
yes. However, if you can't see
Mhm,
anything,
mhm.
theoretically are always seeing yourself. So it's like,
I did not
you
realize
know,
you could
yeah.
target your a friendly with discover.
Yeah, no, because it's just a movement skill.
Oh right.
So
So it's not attack, therefore it doesn't have the enemy only targeting.
so like if you're a no
Hmm.
wind in cap doctor, you can
Hmm.
heal yourself because you're always in base
Oh yeah.
contact with yourself.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
technically, you can discover yourself because you're I don't know you're a cap. You can do
Hmm.
it because my
Hmm.
first thought was, well, you can't just discover nothing. You have to discover a
Hmm.
target. And then when I
Hmm.
looked into, and I don't know if this hasn't been officially FAQ. This is just what I'm hearing on Discord is that you can discover
Hmm.
yourself. And why this is
Hmm.
important is if you have a camouflage infiltrating CC specialist like
Hmm.
an SAS, Beast
Hmm.
Hunter,
Hmm.
um, any brand de Castro, for example.
Hmm.
Um, Caliban is a really good candidate for this one. You
Hmm.
can deploy that model within 8 inches of this QEZ creature.
Hmm.
First short skill, discover yourself, which reveals you, which therefore
Hmm.
means the QEZ creature can attack you. And then second short
Hmm.
skill, surprise attack them back. And
Oh, to get the surprise attack.
you get the
Okay.
surprise attack because if you are a camo marker, you cannot attack the QEZ creature unless you can see it.
Hmm.
And quite often, your opponents deployed the QEZ creature in a way that
Okay.
you can't have eyes on it,
Oh yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Which means you can't engage it. You
Hmm.
can't. There's no other way to reveal unless dodging. But
Hmm.
if you dodge, you can't attack.
Yeah.
So this is the
Okay.
way around it.
So that's another way to get a -3 on it. If they also have martial arts 2,
Yeah.
you can get it down to a 5 on the dice, and at that point they're just crit fishing
Yes. Exactly.
on 3 dice, but
Yeah. Well.
at
Yeah.
least only on a 5.
It goes
Mhm,
down to that old. Yeah.
mhm,
That old the TR bot. It's got 100% chance of critting when it's rolling a one, and it's just it's exactly if it hits, it's definitely critting.
mhm,
So this is and especially for something like a Caliban with Protheon, the ability
mhm,
to suck an extra wound up is really useful. Um, and actually, the other
mhm,
clarification on QAZ creatures is it does not have an unconscious state because when you remove a
yeah,
wound from it, it disappears. So you
mhm,
can only suck
mhm.
one wound off the QAZ creature if you have Protheon, not
Oh, good. That's a good point.
not two because there is no unconscious state for it
Mhm,
to go down.
mhm,
So anyway, yeah, that's something that people might want to pay attention to if they're wondering how the fuck do I kill this QEZ creature? I don't have
mhm,
any reliable like CC specialists except for an SAS or Usha or I mean they're bad
mhm,
examples because Ariadna is a wash with
mhm,
good CC specialists, but there might be
mhm,
an instance where maybe you don't have those 5 points for that CC specialist, but you may already have an
mhm.
infiltrating camo surprise attack specialist that, to be
Yeah.
honest, doesn't even necessarily need to be that good in CC because you're imposing him. Nah, it's a bit risky, but if you push game
You
difficulty,
want to have the 20 CC at least,
yeah,
just so you can't fail it, and then you only fail if they crit.
that's right. Yeah. So
Um, but that is a nice way to get around, because my strategy's always been get a model that has martial arts in there, and then knock them from 11 down to 8. Um, and then at that point, they're getting more into crit fishing territory than you, especially if like Carmen. Excellent. Go up there with her pistol. So she's burst 2, it's burst 3, but it's rolling on 8s and she's rolling on 20, something like
like
that. Yeah.
fives, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, because
Mhm,
the before that, the alternative was just not to deploy that camo marker as a camo marker, just to
mhm,
deploy it as a model on the table,
mhm,
and then just uh, be able to immediately spend an order and try to kill it. But then
mhm,
you lose a surprise attack, and then blah blah
mhm.
blah. But
Oh, yeah, you definitely want to put as many negatives on that Q as a creature as possible.
absolutely. So anyway, that's how I'll be allowing that to be played because I can't see any reason why
Mhm,
you can't. It does sound janky,
mhm.
but what in Infinity isn't a lot. Anything else on supplies? I know we just talked a lot about the QEZ creature.
Supplies is one of our staple missions, and the QAZ creature is the new thing. So I guess that kind of makes sense to talk about it there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Otherwise, it is. It's just yeah. It's just a solid mission. Um,
yep.
all the supply boxes. Good. A good. A
Mhm,
good round five.
mhm. Yes. Yeah. Less brain power than the big ones, but not letting you ease up, and a scenario that allows top table to really have a good game.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always hard to know like what
Yeah.
is a good top table mission, but I think this is. It's a solid standard kind of mission
Mhm. Yep.
that will
Yep.
good a good ending.
Mhm. So with the scenario lineup, figured I'd go over how I approached dealing with those five, and then see what you would like, or what you would approach, how you would approach it if you were going to play. Um, so normally when I approach a 2-day tournament, I look at the two most demanding scenarios. In this case, it's evacuation and power pack. Write a list for each of those scenarios, and then see how those lists cover the other three scenarios. Uh, if they cover them, great. If not, I might tweak the other list to then give coverage in those other scenarios. Uh, in this case, I looked at supplies is kind of like a simpler evacuation, but you can't bank the points during the game. So evacuation, I figured would cover supplies fairly well. Um, Beyond that, the two lists for evacuation power pack I felt could run both acquisition and frontline. So at that point, I've got a choice when I approach the table or the opponent which way to go there. What? How would you approach those five scenarios?
Um, I'll just comment on what you said first
Yeah.
briefly. Yeah,
hmm
I mean that does seem fairly intuitive. Power pack and
hmm
evacuation are
hmm
more curly missions, uh,
hmm
asking different things of
hmm
lists. I guess the only consideration I put in there is when you're comparing evacuation and supplies,
hmm
you have to remember that evacuation has that exclusion zone, and supplies
hmm
does like to have forward deploying specialists. So you just have to make sure that,
Yes.
I guess, depending on the army you're playing,
hmm
how much of that is going to impact your list building and your ability to get forward, or
Yes.
to deploy. Um,
hmm
but it's not necessary. I mean, it depends. Yeah, it depends on the list.
hmm
I know for something like
hmm
supplies, want to
hmm
be able to you want to be able to defend the supply boxes just as well as get them, and I think it's the
hmm
same for evacuation. So I
hmm
guess like the philosophy is still pretty much the same. So
hmm
that was just yeah. Remembering the exclusion zone can
hmm
mean that you're not as capable of defending. You're not as capable of going projecting again in evacuation, but
Yes.
you're
Yeah,
still
that
able
is
to
a good point.
you're still able to defend what is yours. Yes, supplies. It's the middle boxes and evacuation.
hmm
Um,
hmm
how I would plan this mission is thinking about it last night, and I kind of had it's not so much I'm separating the missions because they are kind of they ask us like five missions ask a spread of what spread of what you need to do. Like there's not really like a super hard compartmentalizing of the missions. I like how you're
hmm
sort of saying like demanding missions or weird missions in one box and the other
hmm
ones in the other. How I look at them is missions that ask you to project a defense
hmm
and missions that don't. So the missions that don't are acquisition and frontline
hmm
because there's nothing really that you have to defend. There's no
hmm
point on the map that you have to be looking at. Like frontline
Yes.
is just you have to just take certain parts of the map,
hmm
but that's not until the end of the game. And then
hmm
for acquisition, sure, there's two buttons in a console, but again, you don't
Mhm.
have to worry about them until the end of the game. So you're not
Yeah,
having to like
you don't have to interact with them until turn 3.
yeah, so you're not having to prevent your opponent from getting to a button on turn one, whereas you
Mhm,
are trying to prevent your opponent from getting places in supplies, power
mhm,
pack, and evacuation. Evacuation
mhm,
and supplies for that reason are very similar.
mhm,
Want to make your opponent waste orders getting to their objective, be that the
mhm,
HVTs or the supply boxes, and you want to be able to defend that as well via arrows,
mhm,
mines, heaters, war bands, whatever it
mhm,
is, you want to be able to make that
mhm,
difficult for your opponent. And then power pack, while there are buttons, they're not as important to be pushed early on. But going
mhm,
back to what I said about the DZs being corner DZs, is if you just
mhm,
null deploy in a corner in power pack,
mhm.
your opponent will just sweep into your DZ and make it incredibly difficult for you to punch out again.
Well, with the smaller DZs, there's a lot of board space that your opponent can occupy top of one if you've null deployed.
Yeah,
They could essentially redeploy on the rest of the board.
that's true. Yeah, I mean, if you are projecting something into the midfield with camo markers,
Mhm,
but yeah, you're not gonna have that stretched like line where you can have like a model
mhm,
covering every kind of element of the table. You're really just going to be covering
mhm,
two corners, and depending on what the
mhm,
DZs buildings and DZ or around the DZ are like, you might
mhm.
just have no line of fire to another part of the table, even to your other
Yes.
DZ. So I think it's really
Yes.
important that you are pre- presenting a defensive line,
Mhm,
and it doesn't have to be everything standing up. It just has to be a
mhm,
way in which it makes it difficult for your opponent to gain ground, to
mhm,
hem you in. So I'd say that those three missions really reward if you're going first. Um,
mhm,
taking like taking ground and trying to or putting your opponent on the back foot so that they can't counterattack, which I guess is
mhm,
it's a fairly nominal like that would be I guess it's true for every mission, but because you as a defender you want to be able to stop your opponent from just easily accomplishing the missions, therefore have to have
mhm,
some kind of defense. And then
mhm,
similarly you're attacking, or if you're going first into those three missions,
mhm,
want to have enough gunpower or mobility
mhm,
or visibility, smoke, whatever it is, in order to
mhm,
accomplish those missions. um I mean, of course, your alternative is always just kill, right? Just kill them, and that's always
mhm,
that'll work in all these missions, maybe except for evacuation. But that's how I've looked at them. You know, evacuate those three, and then acquisition and frontline, kind of how I would split it. However, your army's list should probably still be able to do both. It's just maybe which one is better at um um, uh, setting up a layer of defense,
mhm,
especially if you're going second into one of those missions.
mhm.
I think that's what I said
I
there.
guess
Yeah.
probably one thing to bring up with you mentioned like you could always do a kill 'em all. Um, None of these missions, unless I missed one, have no quarter.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
true. I think, with the
So all
exception.
of these missions have retreat as an option.
Oh,
Um,
with the exception of Frontline, which has a really strange wording on retreat.
oh, okay. I looked at this last night and was not sure um, because and I the way I read it, retreat still applies because it doesn't say it doesn't.
Yes, it retreat still applies, but
Mhm.
the under the rules for retreat, the game. Actually, I don't have the rules for the retreat in front of me.
Under the rules for retreat in the main rulebook, it ends at the end of that turn, unless the scenario says otherwise.
Yeah, so in Frontline,
Mhm.
where is it? Be
Uh,
unable to do things
the
now.
end of mission on Frontline doesn't quote retreat,
Yes, that's right.
but it doesn't say it doesn't apply.
That's right. So what that means is retreat. Oh wait, but in the So
In the core rules, retreat triggers end of game.
does it? I don't think it does.
Let me check.
I
Okay.
think in the core rules, it's just retreat because under frontline it says this scenario has a limited time frame, so it will automatically finish at the end of the third game round. Now, if you go to another mission like highly classified, it says
Mhm.
this scenario has a limited time frame, so it'll automatically finish at the end of the third game round. If one of the players starts their active turn and retreat, the game will end at the end of that turn. So frontline does not have that clause. So therefore,
Uh,
so
because in
therefore,
the main rules, uh, in a standard game, if one of the players has starts his active turn and retreat, or in a retreat situation, the game will end at the end of that turn.
hmm, unless does it say anything about unless?
So because that's in the main rule book, the scenario doesn't say it doesn't apply.
Hmm.
Therefore, I believe it still applies.
Right. Okay. So the way that I've always
Uh,
played it is because it doesn't say that the game will end at the end of the when someone goes
mhm,
into retreat in frontline. What
mhm,
happens is
mhm,
you go into retreat, but you continue to play.
mhm,
That's generally that's how that's held. However, I've never actually looked at the rule book to see what that says specifically. So that's interesting that you've noted that it
mhm.
does say that the game ends, which then means why put it in the mission?
I just figured it was always in the mission as a reminder.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but Frontline is one of the weird ones because I even went back several seasons of ITS to verify, and it's the same in each one, where
Yeah.
it doesn't have no quarter, but it also just doesn't have the second sentence in end of mission that quotes the rule book about ending during retreat.
Yeah, so I think the common consensus among veterans is that
Mhm,
frontline is the weird
mhm,
mission that doesn't end in retreat, but retreat still applies. So
mhm.
that's probably how we'll still play it.
Okay.
And even though
Okay.
you have raised a very good point about the fact that it's still in the rule book,
Mhm.
so no FAQ that shit.
Uh, I I assume there is some intention in having it different. I don't think it's an oversight because it's been maintained over many seasons.
Yeah.
Uh, but I'm not sure what the intention was. Hmm.
So what do you think then at the end of those five missions? Do you have a strong opinion on any particular army or player that you know of who could do well in the lineup?
Um, Honestly, I have not thought too well into that. Um, I struggled enough to try to figure out how to do Power Pack with Rama.
Hmm.
Um, because I had been thinking that I was going to take vanilla to this, and then had a conversation with you, and suddenly became inspired to try to write a Power Pack Rama mission, and it worked. So I don't think there's any major sway in any of these missions that will favor vanilla or sectoral. I think it's a fairly even field for those. So the specialist bonuses are fairly spread out as well. And the most specialist intensive mission, Evacuation, doesn't have a specialist bonus. So
Hmm.
you're not getting preference toward any army based on where they throw most of their specialists.
I would
Um,
agree. Yeah.
mhm,
I'm looking at New Kids on the Block Torchlight. I would say that they're
mhm,
probably in a fairly decent position to do
mhm,
well in this scenario, mostly
mhm,
because every fucking profile in that army is a specialist operative. And when you're playing a mission like Evacuation, where you need to have a plethora of specialists,
mhm.
having them just happen to be specialists is really good.
Ooh,
So I think
That is a good call.
Something like that would be pretty good. They have solid gunfighters. They've got MSV. They do lack
Mhm,
smoke, which I think could be a problem. Like they have, I think Hippolyta is their only smoke
mhm,
thrower, and she's like 40 gazillion points. So
mhm.
that might be difficult. But I mean, yeah,
So
just on the
with
basis of
with enough MSV, then you nullify your opponent's ability to smoke out civilians, and you're now playing on an even playing field again.
yeah, I think that might be it. There's a lot of 6-2
Mhm,
movement in that army. High
mhm,
BTS, just in case you decide to walk through a QAZ zone.
mhm,
Um, no, I think Torchlight, like not particularly stand out, but just from like look,
mhm,
them being fairly new as well, they could be quite
mhm.
good. There's a couple of good players that are fielding Torchlight at this weekend.
Yes.
Um, Combined Army is obviously up there. I know Jordan's
Mhm,
running Combined Army, and if anyone's
mhm.
not seen his list already, it's disgusting. So that's probably going to do
I think
fairly
that was
well.
how Robert described it.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's fairly likely. But yeah, no, I think it's open to
Mhm,
any I think yeah, any army. Like you say,
mhm,
there's no preference to sectorals or vanilla.
mhm,
No preference to any particular um, specialist. Um,
mhm. Like I can see with some of the missions like evacuation and supplies where running uh, duos could be helpful just for a little bit of an order efficiency. But you can do that. You can run two duos in all question mark
yeah, I think
vanilla.
so. I
Uh,
guess be careful about link teams in evacuation because you can't evac anybody
correct. You
and
can't sit
still
it back. Yeah.
yeah
Although you can just break the link.
you can just uh break the
Mhm,
link out and then you've got multiple
mhm.
models that could be multiple specialists all in the
Mhm.
right area. But yeah, you
Yeah.
will obviously lose your bonuses when you pick up that civilian. So that might
Mhm,
might make a decision for an opponent is like, do I continue shooting,
mhm,
while I've got bonuses, or do I just cut my losses and break break one model
mhm,
out of the fire team? So I or because you can't just because as soon as you activate the member of the fire team, that becomes who's going to do the civ evacing. That will make them the fire team leader, and then I think you can still civ evac, but it will therefore break the fire
Uh,
team at that point.
can you drop them out between orders?
No, you can't drop individual models out of fire teams,
Mhm,
but
mhm,
you basically have to break the fire. Like civ evacing
mhm,
will break the fire team.
mhm.
Like the only other way of doing it is you could slingshot one member of the fire team who's
Oh,
not
yes.
the link team leader
Mhm,
out of the fire team, and then spend the next order to then civivac, and that would keep
mhm,
fire team active while
mhm,
having one model out of it. But that really depends on
mhm,
how you've structured that fire team and
mhm,
where the civilian is. But yeah, that's something you could do.
mhm.
But that's not really a disadvantage for a sectoral. It's just something to bear in
No,
mind.
because I'm thinking, considering you're going to be breaking it anyways, duos probably are good for that. But I wouldn't really want to dedicate a Haris, um, because if I build a Haris, I want to play it as a Haris,
Mm,
rather than build it just for some order efficiency to move up the field. But
mm.
duos, I'm perfectly happy. Like these people will duo at the beginning of the game because they're deployed next to each other and they can, and that just means I get a little bit more movement out of my order pool.
Yeah, no, that seems reasonable. I would
Mhm,
agree. Well, yeah. No, yeah. There's not really any clear. I'm really excited to see. Like we've got 50% of the field almost. I think is from New South Wales, so that'll be really interesting. So it'll basically
mhm,
be a Victoria versus New South Wales event with
mhm,
a couple of players from South Australia, ACT, and Queensland kind of
mhm,
mix in. We didn't get any players from WA, which is fine because it's a 4 hour flight and it's not a public holiday for them. And we didn't
mhm,
get anyone from Tasmania because apparently nobody lives there anymore who plays Infinity. We did get one player from Northern Territory, so that's good. So it's just
Mhm.
all the so only missed out on two states in the end, or two states in the end, which is quite good. Be happy with that.
How many from ACT?
I think we've just got one. We did have two, but we
Oh,
had
okay.
the drop, unfortunately. But we have
Okay.
representation, so they could win the win. They could win the Red K Cup. Because the way that I'll do it is if you have fewer than three players, then
Mhm.
I will take your highest score and
Mhm.
I guess average it.
Well, just the average of the top 3 players.
Yeah. Yes, the
So if they
average.
only have 2, it's the average of the top of everyone.
Yeah, the average of the top. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's right. I don't just add them together. I add them together and average them because
Mhm.
not everyone's going to have three
Yeah.
players. Yeah, so there's
Mhm.
still definitely a chance for Queensland or the ACT to take it with just one player.
Mhm.
If they win.
Yeah, they'll
That's
get 2 trophies for winning.
yeah. um. Yeah.
Here's your single player trophy, and here's your team trophy for your team of 1.
Imagine that. Imagine if ACT, who currently hold it, come back with one player and win it. Now, if that was Rob, who's not, unfortunately, he's not able to make it. I mean, that would suck. I would hate that so much. I'd be like, fuck you. We have 20 players from Victoria and we can't beat one guy. Um, but yeah, we're really looking forward to it. Good.
Mhm.
Uh, any closing remarks?
Um, who do you think is up for K-Cup then?
Um, it's got to be Victoria. We have the
Okay,
strongest players. We have the strongest players. Absolutely. We are a
good
Shark
answer.
Tank. Gone are the days of funfinity or whatever we used to say. Uh, it's I can't remember. Anyway, we used to be fun. Now we're all like whack players. No, we're not really. We're very nice. Are looking forward to seeing everybody, and it'll be really good. And it'll be really fun event as well. Nice and so like really social. I am going to be doing the bingo
Yeah.
card again for anyone who
Oh, excellent.
was at ARC. After some feedback, it was a really good way to drive some more fun into event. Also, a
Mhm.
little bit of a bit more casual atmosphere. Some lower stakes play for all players involved. So, yeah,
Mhm.
I'll be doing the bingo card again because there really wasn't a better way of implementing challenges that I felt were
Mhm.
as even and interesting.
Well, the bingo card also, I think it at least for me, it helped to catalyze post-game conversation.
Mm.
Because sometimes it can be difficult if like you crush your opponent or you get crushed to go like and talk about game highlights because they all end up one way, and it can feel like I want to talk about the game, but like everything was me crushing my opponent or them crushing me. But with a bingo card, you're like, oh, you got crushed in this way, you get a bingo.
Yeah, no, that was I like
Yeah.
that element that
Mhm.
it's a good way to recap a game.
Mhm.
Like all the sort of wacky or wild fun elements of the
Mhm.
game you can remember. Because you've got
Yeah.
the challenges in front of you. Like, did I do this? Did
Mhm.
this happen to me? Did
Mhm.
I fail
Yeah.
three whip rolls in a row? Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Yay! I get get a point.
Yeah.
So yeah, looking yeah, that'll be good. Um,
Mhm.
anything else about Border Bash?
I
We're on.
think I think that's about it because kind of late for pushing tickets.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, there's still tickets available. I'll take whatever I can get. It's still there. If I can get this episode out, if we can get this episode out in the next 24 hours, there might still be time. Someone's listening to this on
yeah.
their drive
If
to
you hear
work.
this when it premieres, and you can drop everything and travel to Albury, Wodonga, or Albury, yes. Yes, obviously, do it.
Come, come. If you don't have accommodation booked, there's space on a couch at an Airbnb. We'll have beer. The venue is BYO, so that'll make for some fun shenanigans.
Ah, make for an excellent losers bracket.
Absolutely, yeah, I can't wait. You can definitely buy each other. Well, you don't even have to buy each other a beer. You just give them
You can just
one.
bring it and offer it.
Just bring it and offer it. Yeah, Oh, sorry, man, that sucked. Do you want a shot? Okay. I
It'll
do.
make the next round better, I promise.
I do promote responsible drinking of alcohol.
Yes.
Ah. Anyway, I think that's about it.
I think that's a good wrap up. So thank you for listening. And we will be back in a week or two with the Border Bash recap. Well, we'll go over our lists and how the whole tournament turned out. Until then, I've been Nick.
And I've been Kevin.
Good night.
Bye.